Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. I see that people are logging in, so please sit tight. We'll start in a minute. You can see the presenters are already waiting to start the presentation. Let's just give everyone a chance to log in. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and start the introduction. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Gala webinar. My name is Isabella Massardo. I'm content strategist here at Gala. And today's webinar is sponsored and presented by Pangeanic with Manuel Herranz and Armando Estela. And they're going to be talking about data anonymization for compliance, protection, and knowledge. And both speakers have fascinating backgrounds. Manuel Herranz is, as you probably already know, a language industry veteran. And he's a leader of MT developments at Pangeanic since 2007. He created the first Moses-based TM and MT workflow, and I remember that. And then he moved on to neural networks in 2017 and transformed Pangeanic into an LLP solution company. He's been a frequent speaker at various events, and one of the most successful projects that he has led is the MAPA project, which stands for Multilingual Anonymization for Public Administrations, which is a project that he did for the European Union. And the MAPA project has become part of the NLP tools of e-translation and a core system at the Spanish Ministry of Justice and the European Ombudsman's national offices. Armando Estela is Pangeanic CTO since 2017 after a successful career as a head of cybersecurity for Spanish banks. He spent 20 years at IBM in different roles in Spain, France, and the Watson Center in the US. Interesting fact, he is an astrophysicist by training, and his first papers and experiences were at observatories in the Canary Islands. So we will have a Q&A at the end of the session, and feel free to use the chat or the QA box to submit any questions that you might have for our speakers. I would invite you to do so throughout the presentation as you think of them. The webinar will be recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording as soon as it is published on our website. So Manuel and Armando, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabella. Thank you for a kind introduction to the audience. Going through the attendee list, I saw, well, I could see some familiar names there, so I won't introduce myself. I think it's a very kind presentation introduction from you. Okay, so today here we're here to speak about the growing interest on anonymization for compliance from the perspective. I'm going to turn the presentation a little bit more towards the role of NSPs and how translation companies can benefit from this. Typically, I do it. I run this presentation for very mixed audiences, so it means that I have to make sure that everybody understands some terms that's in our niche, in the very niche industry, pretty familiar. Okay, so Pangeanic is an NLP solutions company, even though we still keep a translation services side. Technology has taken over our day-to-day activities, and we are an NLP solutions provider. Now, NLP is very big, it's very wide, as we're going to see in a minute. And NLP, to quote my friend Kirti Vashi, NLP tries to solve one of the most challenging problems of AI, NLP being an AI science. NLP tries to solve the problem of language processing. So helping machines understand humans, our language, and do so at scale. Translate at scale, anonymize at scale, gather information from thousands of pages at a speed that a human can't. Anybody that is familiar with machine translation understands very well what I'm talking about. So here's NLP dissected into the many disciplines that make it up. In natural language processing is the basic technology where you can have hate speech detection, bias detection, image recognition, image and speech obviously are there, but we are dealing with just one point among all these disciplines, which is named entity recognition that you can see here. So with named entity recognition, what we do is detect what actors or what information is contained within a text, and we feed neural networks, so these neural networks can detect, can work at scale on a given discipline, be it classification of data, be it detecting hate speech, detecting PII, personal identifiable data. So today we're going to talk about something that is very personal, our data, and how that is utilized or reutilized or stops us, LSPs, from monetizing data that is sitting in our silos. A little history about how GDPR and privacy laws or acts have been enacted around the world. Every country had some kind of data protection law or acts has had in the last 30, 40 years. But everything changed, and we'll see why in a minute, changed in 2016 when the European Parliament passed GDPR as the law to protect European citizens' data, no matter where they were. So obviously, if you are a European business operating in Europe, you are under GDPR, but the law also extended its reach to any type of data that contain European citizens, that refer to European citizens. So the law also applies to companies doing business in Europe, although they may be located in a different jurisdiction. US, Canada, Africa, Middle East, Japan, etc. Now, there was a turning point, and there was a lot of fear, I have to say. Even some newspapers in the United States blocked IPs coming from Europe because they didn't want their content to be exposed to EU IPs, assuming that would contravene GDPR, which is not the case. GDPR and all the national laws from GDPR are basically concerned about the use and reuse of personal details that happen in databases or in documents in structured data, and how they are shared and how they are monetized. So in 2 years later, following the example of GDPR, similar law was approved in Brazil and in California. California has been spearheading, has been leading the application of privacy laws at US level, although the US in general is pretty lax about it. Typically, there are 2 years. Companies are given 2 years to get used to the requirements, to plan for tools to be implemented. After those 2 years, fines come into effect. In 2020, Japan also enacted its own law, API, for personal data protection, And it has been this year when it has come into effect. Incidentally, the Japanese law is the only one that can send you to prison if you contravene privacy laws. GDPR can. You'll be fined lots of money. Instagram, incidentally, was fined over $400 million for exposing underage users' telephone numbers on their profiles. The Japanese law doesn't allow you to be fined, doesn't allow for fines to be so large, but instead you go to prison. That is one of the key differences about the Japanese law and the rest. So, what is the rationale about this law? Why suddenly so much concern about privacy data? You know, is it not enough that I click and here and I give consent to watch TV or to enter this site? Well, the rationale given during the discussions at the European Parliament and so forth in other parliaments is that it was very good for companies to have users and businesses everywhere, have businesses worldwide and customers everywhere. But the concern was growing about how this data, the user data, was being used in order to improve the algorithms behind the systems. So it is very good and legal that a food delivery company knows what are my trends when I order food to be delivered at home, and that I eat a lot of pizza or Chinese food or Italian food, etc. But it's not so good when that data is reused and contains my name. And when that data has to be shared across a jurisdiction, has to be shared between departments or third parties for monetization, and then I'm exposed as a big pizza eater, for example. But maybe that's not so funny. That's just a joke, a very small example. But it serves to reflect the fact that big businesses have been created piggybacking personal data and knowing what are our preferences, what are our likes, what are the types of pictures that we upload, or the type of posts that we share. And that GDPR tried to put an end to that, as well as providing the means to separate personal data from facts. So let's see what anonymization actually is. Well, anonymization is, to be quite frank, impossible, and anybody involved in developing anonymization software will tell you that. The actual fact, the actual application of anonymization is called de-identification. That is what we are concerned about. Remove personal data from a text or from a database being exported, etc. So any means that might lead me to know who's being mentioned in a text have to be masked. This could be, of course, my name, could be my telephone number, typical things, email, credit card details, bank details, the address where I live. But it can go as far as family relations, next of kin. Being the son of the mayor of London identifies you as a person. Being the husband or the wife of such a famous lawyer identifies you as a person. Job titles, being the CEO of this company, being the night shift manager at X manufacturing plant can identify you. So we're now beginning to see that there is a little bit more complexity in anonymization than just removing John, Mary's, and Peter's from column A in an Excel file. Anonymization, full anonymization, might require removing everything that can lead word knowledge to identify a subject, a person. De-identification deals with only removing the personal details that will help us identify me or Amanda or Isabella in a document. And why is it important to anonymize? Well, looking at the attendee list, I guess that I should answer this question by saying that there's a lot of money to be made and to be monetized if we anonymize data well, because we can find trends and we can feed our algorithms. We can improve our algorithms on what people are eating in a certain area, state, or country, how people are traveling safely from one country to, or from one area to another, how many users, and what are the transport flows of a cab company without our personal details being revealed. But more importantly, from an LSP point of view, when it comes to unstructured data, we don't run the risk of being considered data controllers and passing on personal details to our freelancers. If data controller is the person that is in charge of holding personal details, or taking care that no personal details leave the organization or are not shared across the organization without levels of access being in place, and without the specific consent of the person being mentioned. And that is extremely difficult, because there are situations in which people need to be seconded to plans, need to be discussed or talked about by different departments, from HR to salary slips that need to be produced, Excel files with attendees and non-attendees. Incidentally, no email addresses are here, have been shared on this webinar. And there is no specific consent for me to share my email or my personal details or my salary being linked to my profile. So that leads me to one point here. There is a very obvious application of anonymization, which is let's have a policy and let's have a procedure. Let's have a software that allows us to anonymize data whenever we need to send it out or share it. And okay, we won't get fined. When we have an audit, ISO audit, 2701 data security, even 9001 data management, we have a software that looks after that. Okay, we pay our subscription and fine. Anonymization is done. It's not so simple. Yes, you can implement some software that will allow you to anonymize data, but increasingly what we find is that companies want to come across, want to be seen and perceived as data transparent companies. Companies that don't use our chats on social media, that don't use our conversations, family conversations, to improve their products, yet and they are respectful with our personal details. How we travel, what's our name, or the people that we mentioned in our emails. So transparency is becoming as important, I would say, as the fact that we need to have a policy to avoid fines. So let me now speak a little bit about how we scale this. It's fairly easy to, we could use Word, we could use very manual processes to mask personal details on one file. The problem is that we all work with thousands and thousands of files that contain multiple names and personal details, perhaps in 1 page or 2 pages. And manual processes obviously are out of the equation, they can't work. We need to apply methods that scale. So let's take the format number one here. That is a text that we'll see later. Text is quite straightforward. Anonymization is applied on personal details for more or less strict anonymization. So jobs, locations, actors, and some organizations, company names are deleted or they are masked using labels. There are a number of ways to do this, a number of techniques that we'll see in shortly. But basically, you identify the actors, the places, anything that could lead to identifying a person and a place, and can be deleted, mask it. However, we can find documents that contain images. Many documents contain a signature. Most PowerPoint presentations contain an image that has the company logo. So if I'm masking people's names and then I have the company logo at the top, it's quite clear where they work. And there are other applications, as we can see here, that mask images and faces because it's a legal requirement. For example, at a car park, at a car lot, you leave your car and for very good reasons. The car park will take a picture, the operator will take a picture, so you can freely exit when you've paid and you have your ticket. They recognize your registration plate, sometimes take a picture of your face because it goes together. And they do it for very licit, very legitimate purposes. However, the issue begins, and this is a real case, the issue for the operators begins when they store those pictures in the system, and they do. And they find themselves holding tons and tons of hard disks with pictures of cars and their drivers. Access levels, to have different access levels to these pictures is not enough. In case of hacking, they're doomed. They will get people's faces and registration plates, car plates, and they would be subject to a fine. In any case, as we can see on the static photo, nobody is allowed to take any pictures in a car park where our data, such as a registration plate, can be exposed. So, what are some of the challenges at an enterprise level? Well, anonymization is not a plug and play. It's not a double-click execute file. It's a procedure. It's a system. It's a system that connects to kind of middleware, data processing platform, where different databases can connect, or free text can connect, and then be run. This is an example of a database being exported with some clients being mentioned. Okay, company names are not subject. According to application, but names and surnames we can see, and email addresses can. And this is a very typical export, database export, that can happen at any marketing department that needs to share data, perhaps with an external vendor. So if it's not done properly, you can be requested to provide such details during an audit. Some typical use cases at enterprise level, very corporate level, we've all had experienced situations when somebody was selling door to door at home, trying to sell us a new cable company, a new cable contract, a new electricity offer or gas offer, and we sign the contract on the spot, and they take a picture for our ID or a picture for our own face in order to provide proof that the person signing is the person whose details are mentioned there. All this data is typically stored in databases that contain the documents from that iPad, contain our picture, and contain details about where we live. So utility companies are implementing anonymization in order to build another onion skin layer, so that personal details are not reflected or are stripped from the documents and placed in a different database. Legal offices, that's a given, obviously. Legal professionals have to deal with a lot of personal details, witness details, statements that need to be shared at some point. Witness protection, we've seen cases where the statement has to be made public, but not who said it, for very valid purposes. One of the applications of our European project mapper actually deals with legal protection to witnesses, for which the whole statement about something that happened goes on and on and on, but they need to anonymize or pseudonymize the names of the people that they're mentioning. And many other applications. Databases, as we've seen, images, I've mentioned the car park situation, mobility services, the fact that a company knows that we're taking a taxi or a bus or public transport every day from one place to another. A lot of good information can be extracted from there, but not if it has a name back to it. So a quick overview to the types of anonymization that we might find. The very basic one is reduction. So that means that a person is substituted by a placeholder. The placeholder can be anything, can be an X, can be a $sign, a question mark, whatever. Not very exciting, but very efficient. It doesn't make very good reading, though. This is something that we have been asked to do with TMXs at LSP company level, to anonymize data before it goes out to freelancers. Pseudonymization tends to be very popular because it provides a fake substitute to the person being mentioned. Now, pseudonymization is not a full application of GDPR, because in theory, we could crack the code, or we could access the index file that's been generated to substitute the actors here or the places here that you can see, and theoretically reconstruct the original. The only way to ensure that that is not possible is by deleting the index file after pseudonymization has taken place. So there is no way that somebody can reconstruct the original. That leads me to a very, very important distinction. Anonymization is irreversible. Pseudonymization can be reversible. It doesn't have to be, but it can be reversible. So for a full GDPR application, one needs to prove that pseudonymization is not reversible, that there is no index file, there is no way to crack the code. Other types of anonymization, well, hashing has always been there. I have a list of names, and the names are substituted by whatever. Okay, a number. It's kind of one-way encryption. There's no going back there. Averaging, very funny. We had this case yesterday at Slater. When I mentioned it, you detect what the ages are, what the years are, and then you find an average. So everybody turns up being 40 or 50 or 45. There's a way of not knowing people's ages. Or you have a list of people having different blood types. You see what the most popular blood type is, and everybody becomes that blood type. Shuffling is a different one. It simply mix up and down different types. So the real values remain there, and it makes for nice reading, but the data is not traceable to, can be traced back to the person. And then, of course, partial masking. There are many different techniques. Users use different ones, even within the same document sometimes, to make it really difficult to have any traceability back to any PII. So remember, we have static anonymization. That is when we already have a document, a project anonymizing TMX files or an LSP would be a static, giving documents. The documents are anonymized, sent back. Well, everything happens in the infrastructure. And dynamic anonymization happens when we have a live database and there's data constantly being sent in and out. Dynamic anonymization could happen on the cloud, on cloud translation services. Hacking is a very important, sorry, it's not very important, is a terrible thing nowadays. Nobody's free from being hacked. Colleagues we discuss with, even at IMF, tell me that constantly 24 hours under attack from different sources, because some hackers want to experience the pleasure of having been the ones that cracked the IMF or a certain bank, but also because they want to steal our records. Incidentally, I live in Spain. This is my electricity company, and I can tell you I was not very happy when in March this company was hacked and my personal details, including how much electricity I use, what my electricity bills are, was stolen from your database. This could have been avoided if the databases had been anonymized at source, and my name hadn't appeared there, but had appeared in a different index file. Yeah, so the point really that I want to drive home is that whenever you have an audit, or if you want to establish a good PII or GDPR compliance policy, is that you have, of course, very clear who's the data owner, who's the data officer, the company, etc., the data controller, but also that no personal data from your company is sent out without the prior consent of the person being mentioned. There are hundreds of sites on the internet. I'm just mentioning one that I particularly like, and that is updated very frequently, practically every day, and shows all the latest fines per EU country and the companies that are being fined. And obviously, none of us wants to be on this list, which contains, by the way, from Greek language schools to kebab shops in Germany to big technology giants, as you can see here, telephone companies. Okay, so as we approach the end, let me show you some examples of anonymization at work. This is the contract and the typical results of an anonymization exercise being done on it. Entities have been detected and have been masked using tags, identification tags. This is the beginning also, as you can see, to build data extraction or information retrieval on documents. It is the same technique. The same technique with which you extract data or actors within a text is the same technique used to mask personal data. So just to sum up today and open the floor to questions and stop listening to me and hopefully enjoy Amanda here from a more technical point of view. We all are subject to privacy laws. It it is really irrelevant what the location of our company is. We deal with personal data, and national legislations are adopting serious steps to protect what they perceive as data sovereignty, the data that concerns their citizens. The largest holder of personal data actually are public administrations. Those are the guys that know how much tax we pay, where we live, how many children we have, where we work, etc. So public administrations have been good for business in our case. If you are an ISO certified company, and most of us are, you will be asked sooner or later about your data protection, who's your data officer, about the steps that you're taking in order to anonymize the data that you deal with. Not just TMXs or translation memory files, but also your vendor list, your HR lists of your employees, etc. And there's several solutions, different techniques that can be applied according to the different settings: dynamic, static information, and pseudonymization when you want to provide some data that makes nice reading, parallel data that can be monetized. So as I'd like to conclude here. Really, this is I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I threw some light on the subject and made it fun, or at least you gathered some more information about how anonymization can. What is the importance of anonymization, and how can it help your businesses as LSPs?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. While questions arise, I would like to talk about 3 or 4 things about technicals of the thing, so maybe it's of interest. One thing that I would like to point out is how difficult anonymization is as a technique compared to translation, for instance. And there is a clear ratio there. When a kid starts to talk, to understand about a language, it takes something like 30 million examples, hearing the sentences from the parents or the brothers, etc., in order to be able to understand the language and talk. That's the amount of examples we need to train a neural engine that is going to do translation. For anonymization, in fact, anonymization is a subproduct of named entity recognition. We need 100 less times of examples. So anonymization is clearly easier than translation. Okay, so that's a point. So, for instance, that means that low resources languages are not a big issue like it is for translation. Okay, so another thing I would like to point out is we are seeing translation or other language-related processes being run in the cloud as a SaaS, that is called a SaaS, so a service. Yeah. Well, what we are seeing is that for anonymization, that things are going to change probably. Why? Because most of customers will not go to a cloud to anonymize, to anonymize a text in order to send it to a translation company that is in the cloud too. So you are more interested in do the anonymization on premises. That's important too. Okay? And another thing is we are now 2 or 3 years in this business, and what the usage cases we are seeing are mostly related to compliance, as Manuel has said, also about monetization, as Manuel has already said, and also about sharing information. So, for instance, you are a big corporation and you have an office, a legal office that is a third party. So if you want the legal office to review a contract, you bet anonymize, send the contract is reviewed, and later you de-anonymize in order to be able to create the contract that has been reviewed. And the last thing is about the challenges of anonymization. I mean, what we are seeing is the challenge is not technical. or well, let's say that the big challenge is defining the model, the business model, defining defining what anonymization is, why companies require anonymization, what are the user cases, etc. So it's something that is young, is very new, and technically something that is quite solved. Because it's NER is a technique that has many years in the industry. So well, that's the challenges we are facing now. So that was the 4 things I wanted to talk about.
Thank you so much. Great presentation, both of you. And I see there are some questions. So I'm going to see whether the audience would like to speak directly with you. I think it would be nicer. Let's start with Erica. I'm going to open your microphone if you want to. No? Okay. I'm going to read your question then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Erica.
Sorry. The big problem we deal with nowadays is just because it's a translator company, yeah, and you have a lot of translator as a freelancer, is not into the company, and you have to anonymization included to put in another platform, etc. So our big problems nowadays is just is exactly to use these masks as was presented, but we have problems with our language to make the transition for the general numbers. We are in Brazil, and I think in Spanish we have the same problem as you have the general and the numbers and the plurals impact a lot during the translator and the reviews. So do you have some views about this?
Okay, who wants to take this?
Manuel?
No, I'm not sure I follow the question.
Well,
So,
I think all questions, this question and the next one, refer to the problem that if we do masking, of course, we lose gender or number, etc.
Sorry, yeah.
For complex or flexing languages, things are worse. Manuel, what do you think?
Yeah. Name identity recognition does take into account what is male or female. I presume that we're speaking about pseudonymization, so fake substitution. Yeah. So yes, the way systems are trained, you know what is a male, what is a female. So a female name will be substituted by a female name and a male by a male name. In Western European languages, that is not an issue. Really, it's not an issue. The, let's say, challenges begin in highly inflective languages such as Russian or well, morphologically rich languages, because my name can appear as a dative, accusative, as a genitive. So I'm not Manuel anymore, but I'm Manuelva, for example. So it does not make for nice reading. Yes, we admit that. It is a feature that developers, not just Pangernic, but others are working on in the case of morphologically rich languages. But and it's very clear, the solution is very close as to what happens with machine translation. Really, so far, languages such as Polish or Russian or Baltic languages have to do with only the lemma of the word.
Thank you. And there's some comments from Richard. Let's see, I'm gonna open your microphone, Richard, if you want to speak.
Yes, my question concerns the result of these laws on ordinary newspapers, such as the Los Angeles Times, which I can no longer get when I travel in Europe online. They refuse to publish due to some technical issues, and I'm sure it's the privacy laws. What happened to freedom of the press in this new environment?
I know exactly what you're saying because, to my amazement, I've not been able to access some newspapers across jurisdictions. I can remember where and I can remember what newspaper it was, but I was amazed. Like, I read this every day at home. Why can't I read it here? Really, that has more to do with the LA Times than with GDPR, because I read the San Francisco Chronicle from my laptop in Valencia, Spain.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. There was a general question from Robin. I think she had to leave the session, so I'm going to ask it. Can you share a resource or resources on data security compliance for organizations operating in the US and EU? Can you point people in the right direction?
Resources
Mm-hmm.
in what respects?
I mean, maybe the laws or the best practices.
Oh, yeah.
Data security compliance, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, and I'll take that one as an action point. We should publish a comparison between the different data laws. CCPA in California and the Virginia privacy law radically different to GDPR in Europe and any children laws like LGPD in Brazil or API in Japan, or even Turkish one. We had a call earlier on today with a Turkish partner. They're radically different because the US is very lax about it, and you are allowed to maintain personal data from clients and users for any purpose that you wish, only just as a result of the fact that they are your clients. That would be unthinkable in Europe. If you want to, I can share some summarized information if you wish. If you're happy to contact me, and I can point you to some resources. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Manuel's email and Amanda's email are both on the screen, so you can feel free to reach out to them and start discussing. Let's see whether there are other questions. I think you already replied John's question about fake substitution. So, yeah, I don't see it. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, it's curious about the last question about Sean Common question about when we do substitution. Do we want to use very strange substitutions? No, we don't want to use very strange substitution. We want to help readability of the anonymized document. So best is to change Maria Jones with Antonia Portobello, something like that. Of typical names. So we will never use a dog's name to be replaced by to replace a human's name.
Yeah, but that's okay. I always that's the logic, but I do tell clients, don't be fixated with using names, with substituting a set of names for a different set of names. You can also use numbers. Number one said to number two, blah, 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 blah. And then number two referred to number five, saying, oh, number five, you don't have this. That still makes perfect reading. Okay? Might be a little bit odd. Okay, we don't speak like that, but it makes perfect reading and traceability. Sensibility.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've run out of questions. So once again, I invite you guys to reach out to Manuel and Amanda if you have other things to discuss. And thank you both presenters for being here today. It was a great presentation. And thank you to all the attendees. We would appreciate if you could just take a minute to give us your feedback on today's session using the post-event survey. You'll see the survey when I close the session. and your feedback will help us refine our webinar program. Before you log off though, we have launched our call for proposals for our annual conference in Dublin, which is scheduled for March 12th to March 15th, 2023. So if you feel like it, please submit your proposals, and this goes for Armando and Manuel as well. Feel free to submit proposals. Next week's webinar on September 29th, we have scheduled another presentation with the team at All Correct on quality management with the help of users review in game localization. So feel free to join. The registration is already open. And for now, have a good day, have a good evening, and hope to see you at another gala event. Manuel and Armando, thank you so much.
Thank you, Isabella.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. God bless. Bye.